I'm happiest in the saddle.
A fellow sportsman.
I am an FBI agent!
Great Scott!
What do you say we cut the chit-chat? A-hole!
Dogs and cats living together. Mass hysteria.
Come with me if you want to live.
Hello and welcome to Retro Ramble. I'm Charlie McGee.
I'm George McGee.
And welcome to part 2 of our Retro Ramble on Paul Verhoeven's 1990 sci-fi action classic that is Total Recall. We hope you enjoyed part 1. Would you say they did, George?
Well, hopefully so. And if you haven't listened to part 1, go back.
Get your ass out of here! I think what it was, we didn't realize, I certainly didn't realize how much production chat there was going on. George and I, big fans of Philip K. Dick. I knew that his books and the inspiration was going to come into it, but we love these sort of time travel or existential things like The Matrix, or whether it be something like Inception, films that really challenge the concept. And this was one from a long time ago.
Yeah, so obviously in this episode we try and unpick Total Recall's plot a little bit more. What does it all mean and how it would pave the way for a sequel? And there are some crazy ideas about the potential sequels that almost made it to screen. There's still a lot to unpack in this episode. Obviously, we won't give the usual Retro Ramble disclaimer, but there will be spoilers about films you'll never see. There will be probably some more Arnie impressions, who knows?
Yeah, so to set the scene, when we left you, we'd covered the film in some detail, and George and I started talking about, so what is the plot of this film? And we talked about how even Paul Verhoeven admits this film is ambiguous in that there are two realities that could be interpreted from what's going on. And in this episode, George and I tried to not only understand what that could be, but how that actually transpired into a sequel, like where the story goes. So anyway, we thank you for coming back for part 2. We rambled on for an hour last time. It's a little bit shorter this time, but it's still worthwhile. We've got all the usual. We've got some suspicious spin-offs. We've got Coulda Woulda Shoulda, and we've got you, our dear listeners, giving us some feedback. We're going to give you some shout-outs. We're going to love the love, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Enjoy. Part 2.
So, George, where are we? I mean, is there anything else you want to chat about on the film, or should we hop on to our usual features?
So I've got quite a bit to discuss on what was going to be Total Recall 2 in Suspicious Spin-Offs. So should we get cracking on that?
Before we jump into the suspicious spin-offs, are we sure about what the plot of this film is? I don't know about you, because I was thinking about that this first time that we watched this as kids. Then we went and read all the Philip K. Dick stuff, and you're like, wait a minute, it's all about what's real and what's a dream. And it's alluded to at the beginning. We talked about earlier. It's alluded to at the beginning and the end of this film. It starts off in what we're told is a dream, and it ends with this question with him and Melina and breathing clean air in Mars, blue sky on Mars. Could it be a dream? So, what's your take on it?
I honestly don't know. Like, there's part of me that wants to believe it's.
Because we've talked about this a lot over the years.
Yeah, no, there's part of me that wants to believe it is real, and the whole, like, he was Hauser all along. And watching these, there's a good interview with Paul Verhoeven on the Blu-ray, and obviously listen to some of the commentary as well. And he says that it is open to interpretation. He says there's no right answer. They're both. What was it? He calls them they're both realities. You just choose which one's real. So, but the one thing he does says, up until Quaid gets up to approaches Recall and gets in the chair, that's all real. But it's up to you to decide what happens next. Is that all part of the ego trip? Is that all part of the Recall implant? Or is it a botched thing? Is it actually really happening? And the other thing that they usually say is when you fade to black, that means an end. But Total Recall, when he kisses Melina at the end, it fades to white, which usually symbolizes waking up from a dream, or in Verhoeven's mind, could suggest he's being lobotomized. So, yeah, I think because probably I watched it at a young age. There's part of me that
over the head.
No, but I look at I take the optimistic approach and say yes, it actually happened. It's not a dream, but because I've become older and cynical and read a lot more Philip K. Dick, there's part of me that's saying no, it probably is a dream. I just admit that to myself.
I think what's great, though, is how much of a homage this pays to Philip K. Dick's work. As we said, a lot of his stories follow a similar thing about reality, existence, dream worlds, paranoia. And throughout this film, it's not all the time, but just enough to keep it in the present head. And then there's the reveal at the end where, it was me all along. I want my body back. Sorry, George has practiced the Arnie much better than I have. But yeah, there's that reveal, and you're like, so. But I think it is because I think we're talking on two levels. On the face value level, he had the memories implanted. He was working for Cohagen, and then you make up your mind as to whether or not he succeeded in getting Quado killed, or did he actually switch before? And this is Cohagen trying to get him back and just trying to lobotomize him and get his agent back. So there's that's the face value. And I think which is the much more complex and convoluted one that you're talking about is that from the second he sits in the chair, everything that we see in the film is the dream implant. Even the bit where the doctor says, "I haven't implanted the memories yet." Yes. That's actually the dream. So that's a theory that it all starts from, especially with Verhoeven backing it up. Yeah. Or maybe he's just designed it to be that way, that it could be interpreted one of two completely different ways.
Well, as I say, that's a bit that still confuses me a little bit. That little glimpse of when you see Hauser, of him saying, you blew my cover, and he's like, oh, it's all part of the thing. He's like, well, we haven't implanted it yet. It's like, well, how does that work in Quaid's head? Like, where's that come from? And the other part is, if it is all in his head, is why do we see
bits when he's unconscious?
Why do we see bits with just Cohagen and Richter and other characters that aren't Quaid? So, but I suppose you could argue, well, stuff happens in dreams and you can't explain. But yes, we are probably going a little bit cross-eyed and a little bit too deep. But that's a question of like, well, how do you follow up on this film? But apparently there were real efforts to make a sequel a reality. So
let's have some suspicious spin-offs.
First spin-off or sequel idea came from Gary Goldman, Verhoeven's sort of go-to writer. In the early 90s, after this, he bought the rights to Minority Report, and he wanted to direct it himself as a low-budget feature. But as he had a relationship with Verhoeven, he took it to Verhoeven and said, oh, well, would you be interested in executive producing it for me? Because obviously, your name will help finance it. And Verhoeven looked at the story and he was like, well, hang on, this could work as a Total Recall sequel. So Minority Report could work as a Total Recall sequel because in Verhoeven's mind, it was already established in the first Total Recall that the mutants have telepathic powers. Could the mutants not become the precogs in Minority Report that predict the crimes that happen? And Arnie's the John Anderton, he's heading up that company.
Interesting. And
that's what appealed to, and again, this is something that Verhoeven talks about on the DVD or the Blu-ray. He says he's never done a sequel to any of his films because he says, what's the point of doing something you've already done? Where's the
what an idea? Artist, such an artist.
How can you be passionate about it if it's something you've already done? And that was the thing with the way Gary Goldman says it, it's like that's what appealed to Verhoeven. It was the possibility of doing a sequel that seemed original. It wasn't repetitive or derivative. It was something else. So they developed the script. Arnie was on board. Verhoeven was going to direct it. And then, ironically, same thing. What happened with DEG? Karolko went bankrupt in the late 90s. So we talked about this. We briefly touched on this on Universal Soldier, that they were having some financial difficulties around Universal Soldier, and they managed to string it out for a few more years. And I think the film that broke them was Cutthroat Island. That was a massive flop for them. And they basically went bankrupt. So Carolco went bankrupt in 1997. Dimension Films, so Dimension are really known for doing horror films. They did obviously the Scream series and things like that. So they are a division of Miramax, so the Weinsteins. So they picked it up. They bought the theatrical prequel and remake rights to Total Recall. But unbeknownst to them, Carolco had sold off the TV rights to somebody else. So there was actually a TV show, Total Recall 2070, that was released in the late 90s that it ran for one season. Nobody saw it. But apparently that took more of apparently it owed, I've never seen it, I think I remember seeing like a trailer years ago, but it owed more to Blade Runner than Total Recall because it was set on Earth. It was a guy that was teamed up with an android and stuff like that, and it was sort of like a buddy cop thing, but it had something to do with implanted memories, but nothing was set on Mars. It didn't have Quaid in or anything like that. So yeah, I'd say Dimension had picked it up. So they brought back Ron Shusett and Gary Goldman to repen a brand new idea. So they dropped the Minority Report angle and said, okay, what would you do? We loved the first one. We want to keep the audience guessing whether it's a dream, a reality or not. So I'm going to try and talk through this script, and this is all in Tales from Development Hell. So apologies if I go on. I've tried to abbreviate it. So just bear with me. So it opens pretty much like after the ending of the original. So it's amid celebrations on Mars's independence with Quaid and Melina being honoured by the president for helping, liberate Mars. And just as Quaid is about to give a speech, a double of Quaid turns up, stabs him, and takes his place. And then Quaid wakes up to find himself next to Melina. It's only 3 weeks since the events of Total Recall, and the independence of Mars hasn't happened. So that's been the first part has been a dream. The rebels tell him of a thing called Project Whisper, a form of mind control being planned by the government, and they suggest delving back into Hauser's mind to see if he knew anything about it. So they put Quaid back in the Total Recall machine, and he wakes up back at Recall with Laurie at his side, with Bob, the Recall salesman, and Dr. Eggmar all by his side.
Oh my god.
But there's more, because all the stuff on Mars has happened. So they've convinced him that yes, he never went to Mars, but yeah, all the stuff on Mars has happened. So Mars has air, Cohagen's dead, but Dr. Eggmar's excuse is, oh well, we've had the TV's been on in the background, so it's obviously filtered into your subconscious. That's why you dreamt it. So Quaid goes home. Apparently Laurie, in this time, because he's been in a coma for 6 months, is seeing someone else. So Quaid gets another job, and he starts working on a space elevator. Those things like it's in an Arthur C. Clarke novel. So he's working on this thing, and then he's framed for an explosion on the space elevator and put in a space prison for 6 months. He escapes. He gets back to the rebels, and then they send him to Russia to find out about Project Whisper, where Quaid encounters Hauser's mother, who is behind Project Whisper, which is, get this, a planet-wide program designed to keep the electorate voting a certain way. So that's not, prescient at all. And this is my favourite bit. After a gunfight with a dozen Laurie clones and his own mother, Quaid destroys Project Whisper and leads to the independence of Mars. So it goes full circle. He liberates Mars. And he's about to make a speech when he sees Dr. Eggmar sitting in the front seat, but then he disappears. Did his eyes deceive him? Or is he back at Recall, dreaming of Martian independence? So that's how it ends.
Oh my god, sounds great. Make it. Let's do it.
So Dimension loved the script. Arnie thought it was too complicated. Bless him. So like they went through like loads of script rewrites, and then Arnie ended up going off to do The Sixth Day instead. So this is around like 2000, I think it was. And obviously that's a very similar thing, Arnie and a clone and stuff like that. And then obviously a few years later, he would become the governor and was out of action for 10 years. And because Miramax went through had a few flops, I think it just was shelved. So I think that's why it languished for quite a few years until obviously, I think it was 2012, they did the remake with Colin Farrell.
So, but why do that remake when you've got this amazing sequel?
It's a brilliant idea. And apparently... it says in this book that Harvey Weinstein had a professional working relationship with Sharon Stone, so he was like adamant she had to be back in the franchise. That's why I was like, so what? So he's back on Earth, Laurie's back, and yeah, there's loads of clones of her as well. Sort of like keep putting Sharon in there. But yeah, it does sound a little bit ridiculous of like, oh, it's a dream. Oh, he's waking up. Oh, it's another thing.
A dream within a dream, and it's your mother. Kill your mother. Shoot her.
Shoot her. But I also love the whole concept of it potentially, it almost being a Minority Report adaptation as well.
Well, yeah, I think that's much more, and that sounds like I can understand why Verhoeven would be interested. That's bringing something new, going back and doing it again. It's continuing the paranoia, the is it a dream? Yeah. But no, I still ask the question: why didn't they do that with Colin Farrell? They could have easily just inserted him. They could have done the jump back to Recall, made the sets look exactly like the original film, and he'd wake up and say, but I'm Colin Farrell. I'm not Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm not me. And it's like, that's who you were in the dream. You look different. You were an Austrian bodybuilder, but unfortunately you're stuck with looking like Colin Farrell. I thought you could explain it, one way or another, that there's a change in the characters and you could have made an amazing sequel, but they went down the remake and it looks nice. I remember that film, I've watched enough of it say it looks impressive in terms of the CGI and whatever, but no, the problem with the remake, it's not completely terrible, but it's trying to be its own thing and trying to be different from the original, but it ends up being really reminiscent of other Philip K. Dick films. So it reminded me loads of Minority Report and Blade Runner and even Paycheck. It's got those like glossy sort of CGI, car scenes and stuff like that, and with the robots and it just doesn't. It tries to be different, but just doesn't bring anything new to the table. I mean, obviously, it makes interesting things. It combines the role of Richter and Laurie into one person. So Kate Beckinsale's like his wife, but she's also the badass hunting him. But yeah, it just doesn't really it's very forgettable. I also think it's not the best of Colin
Ironically,
Farrell.
I should say.
We want Colin Farrell needs to be turned up. You want more Colin Farrell from In Bruges, or where he's actually, I don't know, bringing it. I don't like the version of him you get in Total Recall, the remake, where he's just like.
Well, he's kind of phoning it in, isn't he? And it's. Again, it's a bit like my issue with Paycheck. It's doing that very much. It's a bit like, oh, let's just do a futuristic version of Bourne Identity of. I don't know. Maybe the original Total Recall is so much lightning in a bottle of it's a ridiculous idea, but because of Verhoeven, because of Arnie's casting, it just kind of works. It's kind of all those perfect elements. But when you try and recreate it and try and make it different, it's just like, no, it doesn't really work as much.
I just feel where remakes nostalgia is given better service today than it was getting when they made these Point Break and Total Recall remakes. I think we're in a better zone now. They've seen the success. It's like, if you're gonna do it properly. Get the Star Wars, get the original actors back. We don't care how old they look or if they're dead. In terms of Rogue One,
we'll bring it back anyway.
Cushing, bring it back. I don't care if he's dead. Get the computers to do the face thing.
Throw money at it until he's alive.
No, but I feel like nostalgia is getting a better service, whereas I think Total Recall, and I do include Point Break in this, were made very lazily when Hollywood wasn't ready to admit that it run out of ideas, but it had, and it was even being lackluster with recycling
Yeah, well, no,
brilliant ideas from the past.
No, it's purely about intellectual property. It's about like, well, we've got a name that people remember. Let's just make a film.
Brand recognition.
Yeah, but shall we? Move on.
Sorry, I've got a Deliveroo coming.
Oh, okay.
It's not actually Deliveroo. It's Jeff Goldblum and Celine Dion. And you know what they're asking?
Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
So, Coulda Woulda Shoulda. So, I've talked about, obviously, this film went through many different iterations with different directors. So, there was quite a few big names attached before Arnie came on board. So,
mein Bruder.
Well, apparently they name drop in the commentary that Jeff Bridges was attached in one of the earlier versions, which I can kind of see.
No, he would be young. He would have been quite young, yeah.
As Quaid.
Right.
So this is all for Quaid. David Cronenberg wanted William Hurt as Quaid, because again, I say the script at the time, he was an unassuming accountant. But they did quite a lot of work with Richard Dreyfuss, which is so bizarre. Apparently, obviously he was quite big off, around that time, sort of mid 80s of, he'd done quite a few Spielberg films. And so he had quite an active input. But then when Cronenberg walked, he walked as well. But when Bruce Beresford, his version, in Australia, when they were building the sets, it was going to be none other than Patrick Swayze.
Oh my God! What a different film! And I'd take it. I'd take it definitely. Yeah.
You are a prisoner of your mind.
You are a prisoner of Total Recall.
Recall.
Nobody puts Laurie in the corner.
Nobody puts my mind in the corner. What?
Just those hips. He could have just and he's got the kung fu moves for it. No, I'm sorry, George. That I do love Arnie, but there's enough Arnie films out there. I would actually live. I would shoulda. I would have said shoulda, because I could live in the universe with all the other Arnie films where Patrick Swayze was in this Total Recall and Arnie wasn't. I could live with that actually.
No. I want to go back to your Colin Farrell idea. I think they keep waking up and he's a different person. So it's Jeff Bridges, it's Richard Dreyfuss, it's Arnie. Oh no, wait, it's Patrick Swayze. Mindfuck, did you?
It's Christian Slater.
We didn't pay for you. I was just grabbing some lunch on the set. I'm not really in this movie. But wait, there's more. So I've got alternative casting for the role of Richter. So apparently, I've got these two from IMDb trivia. So as always, take with a pinch of salt. So apparently, Kurtwood Smith, none other, Mr. Clarence Boddicker. Oh. Well, it makes sense. He turned it down because he felt it was too similar to Clarence Boddicker.
I'm being typecast. Well, say goodbye to your career, buddy.
So I'm employed by Ronnie Cox. I'm a real shit. Okay, yeah, I can.
Yeah, I can see.
But the other person considered for Richter was Robert Davi. Mr. Franz Sanchez from License to Kill and one of Agents Johnson and Johnson from Die Hard.
Amazing actor. Not seen him in enough things.
He needs to be.
But what he was in, what stuff he was in, he was amazing.
And obviously the Goonies as well. So yeah, that's Coulda Woulda Shoulda. Obviously, for the role of Quaid, it could have been very, very different. And obviously in the hands of David Cronenberg, it could have been very, very different. And in this book, Tales from Development Hell, you get apparently David Cronenberg hates the Verhoeven. He's just like, it's a terrible movie. It's a terrible movie. He's like,
yeah, well, he'd say that.
But I suppose if you've invested a lot of time in it and you have a vision, you're not going to be.
Well, George, you and I we have to pay respect that there's a very large group of cinema goers out there who are more intellectual and prefer to be more intellectually stimulated during film than we are. For example, we respect these films, but we tend to invest our time in more films like this. So yeah, I get it that Cronenberg would have done a masterpiece, probably would have got more awards and would have been more thought-provoking and less
would have been more cerebral, wouldn't it?
Yeah, less boobs and less rods through the head.
And to be honest, we all need more chicks with 3 boobs. You know, you don't.
Maybe I make him wish I had 3 hands. But you have Benny. Does Benny have 3 hands? Anyway, isn't he driving at one stage? He's driving the tank. Didn't we catch that? Or am I imagining that?
No, he's driving. He is driving the tank. Oh no, you're not getting confused with Terminator 2 when the T-1000's driving.
I'm getting confused.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, that's the scene that we would. This is how George and I would look at films. We'd look every single scene of an action film to see if we missed anything. So that was Coulda Woulda Shoulda. Thank you, Jeff and Celine. I really got I don't know what they've done with my Deliveroo driver. The map just says that the bike is outside my address, and I don't know. Maybe he's on the pavement.
Should we see what our listeners and our followers thought?
Well, I can tell you, people were very excited we were covering this film.
Yes, yeah, very much so. I mean, it seems
as
like
you should be.
It seems like a lot of people grew up with this film. Do you want to start?
I don't know. Am I seeing the first comment? I've got our good friends over there. We share a lot of their stuff. They share a lot of ours. Obviously, on the same mindset. That's Tech Noir Film Club. Just saying, hope you enjoyed the rewatch with an open mind. Did you remember that was used as a sample in a techno house track?
Yes.
Trance track.
Yeah, no.
Open your mind. Oh, I think everyone of that age must remember that track.
Yeah, no, it came up in the IMDb trivia. I think it's Isura or something like that.
Asura, Open Your Mind. And it's actually called Open Your Mind. Oh, they don't actually. The ow is not in the title.
We'll drop it in at the end as a little teaser. I'm sure we'll chuck that in post.
And the Techno has also included the picture of Arnie
doing his COVID test.
COVID, because that's the gift that George sent me when I told him I just done my COVID tests, and it's remarkably similar. The only difference being no head towel.
Well, maybe when the next time you do a COVID test, you turn up with a wet towel around your head.
It's actually not that bad. It's just a few seconds of just like, meh.
So next up we have regular follower Antonio Garcia Amante. He's been looking forward to this, so he's looking forward to our thoughts on it. Hopefully we've done it justice, Antonio. But do you want to take the next one, Charlie, from our good old friend Marcus Bird?
Yes, so he's got an insight. He's got some production chat. Marcus has arrived at Production Chat Island. Welcome, Marcus. Hope you enjoy your time here. So Marcus has made us aware that apparently Verhoeven wanted to give the mutant hooker 4 breasts, not those lovely 3. But yeah, I think, it's just give her 4 tits.
Well, you know, as Benny says, you know, he makes me wish I had 3 hands.
I think what we can all agree on from a very male and chauvinistic point of view, there's never, as long as we've got enough hands, no amount of tits is too much.
enough hands. Yeah, there's also a few people on the chat just come on, Cohagen, give those people the air.
I like the one, George, start the podcast. That's from Andy Jones.
Yeah, Casey Millwood, he grew up with it and has lots of fond memories of watching it as well. Dennis C.K. Pang, he's a big fan of this. He got in touch with us, and he thinks
Arnie makes the film what it is, with his one-liners, with his quips. It makes it a very different film. You know, it uses his physicality and his humor.
He also talks about using that man as a human shield. So yes, it's obviously a highlight. But yeah, I think that's the main point. But I think who else got in touch with us? Yeah, someone's just put Larry Chews just put a gif of the fat lady as Arnie describes in the commentary. And again, I think we'll have to share a link. The commentary on the DVD between Paul Verhoeven and Arnie is something else, because Paul Verhoeven's trying to give you some insight into the film, and Arnie is literally just describing what's on screen. He's like, now I'm dressed as a fat old lady, and it's funny because she's fat, and Verhoeven's like, yeah, we wanted to play on duality, and he's like, yeah, I know, but it's funny because I'm dressed as a lady. And then Sharon hits me in the balls. Yeah, that hurt. That really hurt.
More Arnie noises.
More Arnie. Yeah, I say great Arnie. Andy McEwen says, fantastic film, great lines, cool to see the future so fucked up with corporate dicks controlling resources, and who could forget Johnny Cab?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think have we given everyone a shout out? Yeah, we've got Paul Wallace, Lee Hallam.
I'm just checking. We had one more in our messages.
James Diaz, thank you very much. Yeah, we will be releasing at some point in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, Sean Malloy's, again, he's a frequent follower of ours. Thank you for following us, Sean. He says it may not be his favourite Schwarzenegger film, but it's certainly the most memorable. It stands out for being, like most Verhoeven films, because of its insane amount of violence. And he says that, he thinks that's the point with Verhoeven. It's parodying American cinema. But shout out for Sean, because he also has a podcast. He got in touch with us when we were covering Universal Soldier, because his podcast is all about Dolph Lundgren, and his podcast is called I Must Break This Podcast. So check out Sean's podcast. If you enjoy it, let him know.
There's a few other people, but we haven't got time. Thank you, everybody, for getting in touch, as always, sharing, liking, and commenting. I'm just trying to think, is there anything else we need to cover? I think we've covered Arnie in the past. We've covered Philip K. Dick in the past, Ronnie Cox. There's a lot of old flames. It's so good to go back and revisit them. I think we do look back from today with, rose-tinted glasses. But when you look at the quality, the fact that I'm sure there are films that have come out over the last decade that you will look back in 30 years and say, yeah, but these guys, they're all in the same place. And that's what these films are, for better or worse. Arnie wasn't always in the best films, but he made a lot of great action films. And we are trying to focus on his highlights, the things that really took cinema forward, even if it is pretty much on the action or sci-fi level rather than the intellectual.
You just don't get films like this anymore. It was such a product of its time, like an ultra-violent, high-concept sci-fi film with Arnie, one of the most expensive films at the time being an 18 certificate.
With Paul Verhoeven as the director.
That goes on to become the biggest hit of the year. You don't get that anymore. But you made some comparisons.
You get the occasional sleeper. Sorry, go on.
No, but you made some comparisons recently, and probably the best comparison is Inception, of a cerebral, big budget sci-fi picture. But again, I say you're not going to get. Obviously, you've got in terms of high grossing violent action films, you've still got John Wick is turning over business. I'm struggling to think of anything else. Obviously, we are in the age, we keep talking about it, of Marvel at the box office, DC, but you don't get those big budget, ultra violent gore fest. I suppose Drive is the only, that was a kind of an independent. Yeah, and I suppose
in a way,
it doesn't.
That was ultra violent.
It doesn't need to be ultra violent, but I'm just saying it's obviously, yeah, we're big fans of intelligent sci-fi. We're big fans of action, and I think this film marries them both up. It's such a unique product of high concept sci-fi, ridiculous, very silly action, Arnie one-liners, and lovely Sharon Stone, and a lovely lady with 3 boobies. What more can you ask for?
Well, to bring it full circle, we were talking about Philip K. Dick's short stories, and maybe and Minority Report. Obviously, his other big films aren't all short stories, but there's a lot to be said about this connection that I feel why you would combine, like, the concept of film is this short story. It could be a bedtime story. You could say, there's not always a beginning and there is always a beginning and a middle and an end, but how much you spend on them depends on whether or not you're making a comedy or you're Peter Jackson. All my films are 3 hours. It's like
no, but they obviously they've tried, and again we're going on a bit, but they did the Philip K. Dick's the series.
I really enjoyed that. What's it called? Something
Electric Dreams.
I really enjoyed it, and I thought some of them, they were up there with Black Mirror, and in a way more enjoyable because less, bleak.
I think that's that was the problem with that series. I don't think it got enough exposure. It was on
Amazon.
Well, no, in the UK we got it on Channel 4, and it had some, it had some really good talent in it, some good actors. It had Bryan Cranston. It had, who else?
That chick from X-Men.
Anna Paquin. It had Timothy Spall.
Yeah.
It had Steve Buscemi. I had some really good actors in it, and I think I had some really good. I still haven't watched all of them. I think a few of them, but again,
some are better than others.
But again, that's the nature of the short stories. It's it's a bit like a sketch show. It's hit and miss. So yeah, I think obviously I think we're still going to continue to get Philip K. Dick adaptations, because there are
man
some.
Was a genius.
Yeah,
he was a genius.
Crazy genius.
Yeah, I mean, was he the one who thought that his radio was? What was it?
Either his radio or his cat was telling him some, feeding him some communist propaganda or something like that.
But if you want to know what state of mind,
no. I think his cat told him that the universe was going to end or something like that.
If you want to know the state of his mind, I think it's Scanner Darkly. The opening scenes of that, in terms of paranoia, is brilliant.
Yes, no. I mean, I rewatched A Scanner Darkly recently, and it's such a unique film. So that's
a film that can make you feel stoned without imbibing any cannabis. Simply from watching it.
And again, it's one of those films that was sort of made, I think, sort of mid-noughties, and it's got a hell of
early noughties. Robert Downey Jr., Keanu, Wyona,
Woody Harrelson. It's got a cracking cast. It's really, as Charlie says, it's really trippy because it's done with rotoscoping, so it's filmed and then it's animated over the top.
It's like
so yeah, it's
two layers of what is in Into the Spider-Verse. It's Into the Spider-Verse. They do original cartoons, then they do the rotoscoping, then they do CGI on top. So it just shows you where it's gone and why. I thought of A Scanner Darkly when I saw Spider-Verse.
But I think we've rambled on for long enough.
The name's in the show. Calm down.
I'm sure we can.
So should we move on to the film? Should we start talking about it? Oh no, we already did.
Should we go back and talk about the Laurie clones? Actually, I'm just going to finish on my suspicious spin-off. It's called Keeping Up with Coulda, and it's basically a sitcom about Coulda, and it's basically him getting his hair cut, him going to the shops, him and George, who's his main body, fighting over what they have for dinner. I think Disney Plus are going to pick it up for 12 episodes.
I have this, it's not really a suspicious spin-off, but I have to share it with George because this is sort of juvenile humor that we have. I have this annoying talent, and I don't know if I inherited it from our dad, that I can remember when I've seen a film, like an actor in another film, and as soon as I work it out, I'll say it out loud, regardless of where we are. So like if we're in the cinema or if I think I've got that from dad.
Sorry, I've got my head in my hands because I can already envisage our dad doing this.
Yeah. We went and watched we went and watched Broken Arrow with Dad in the cinema, and he's shouting at the screen, "We've been to Houston, another helicopter blowing up. This is ridiculous." So in this film, for me, it was where have I seen the Quado guy before?
He's
and it's the guy from Starship Troopers who goes, "They get into your brains." They, that's that whole scene of. So he's the is Admiral who's lost his shit.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that until we went back to it this time. And he's got crazy eyes. But I think there's more to be had. I'd love to see At Home with the Quados, or whatever you're going to call your show.
Keeping Up with Coulda.
Keeping Up with Quados. Yeah, shut up and make it already.
And I just imagine him finishing, like proper 90s sitcom, and it's sort of almost like, SpaghettiOs. You read my mind.
Who's actually eating this dinner? Is it you or the host?
Exactly.
So many questions.
So many questions. So yeah, that was Total Recall. Apologies.
That's what this podcast is about. It's not about intellectual debate on a film. It's about George and I going back to the films of our youth, watching them again, and just trying to tie in all the nonsense we've thought about these films since we first saw them to watching them today. And thank you for putting up with it. I hope you found it enlightening, enjoyable, and maybe it's answered and raised a few important questions. So, George, what do we do? Can we tell the audience what we've got coming up next?
I can't.
No, 2 weeks. We can tell you in 2 weeks.
I can't remember. Did we say we're doing cliffhanger next, or were we sitting on that? I think
we said we need to put a breakwater between the Arnie.
We're
doing something.
We're going to do Highlander to commemorate the late, great Sir Sean Connery. We were going to do this back in August for Sean Connery's birthday, but due to lockdown restrictions, we couldn't get together in person. But we're going to do it remotely, and we're going to have a guest. Yeah, and I think we wanted to say something towards the end of the year. As I say, we were going to do this to celebrate his birthday. Then obviously we've had what's happened, and then he's passed. So it's to celebrate his life, and we are getting one of
back
his greatest films, Highlander.
So, well, we couldn't do the one he got the Oscar for because we already did it. But
we've done one better. We're bringing the guest back.
The same guest, the same man who has a love of Sean Connery Sir Sean Connery as much as we do. So yeah, looking forward to taking a retro ramble on Highlander with Mr. Andrew Hughes, or AKA Hughesy, and many he has many other names with us.
So yes, I think I'm looking forward to that because there's some difference of opinions on Highlander. Is it a good film? Question mark.
Or is it just an amazing soundtrack with some good video to watch while you listen to the kick-ass tracks?
Definitely a case of rose-tinted spectacles on that.
We'll find out. Let's not cast the die just yet, dear Bruder.
Yes, indeed.
So, thank you all for listening, downloading, and sharing on all of the channels. I think it goes without saying that, this we enjoy still doing this. We feel like we've got a handle on the remote retro ramble. That's a third R.
I thought you were going to say we've got a handle on our reality.
I think we've got to handle what we think the plot of Total Recall is. We're still not sure. No, but we feel like we're getting a bit more used to doing these things remotely. It doesn't quench the thirst for in-person retro ramble. But I think these are working better than any of our original forays into doing things remotely. So we hope you enjoy these episodes. Thank you.
I'm wearing these biker gloves so I can touch you through the internet.
I know, I've told you, could you please stop doing that? That's not what they're for. They've got an entirely innocent use.
I already smell more suggestible. What? Are you pumping pheromones through my keyboard?
Who's stealing your thoughts?
Yes, as always, if you enjoy this podcast, please share.
Get your ass to Mars. Get your ass to Mars.
Please share with like-minded people. And if you have the time, leave us a review on iTunes. That always helps our visibility. Retweet, share stuff on social. But thank you for all the comments and support. And we will see you next time. Or you'll hear us.
See you, experience with you, whatever. Thank you.
I'm not me, then who the hell am I?
Well, just don't overthink it, Arnie. Don't overthink it. So, yeah, thank you. We're going to have to insert some more Arnie noises because I don't think we had enough. But no, that's it from me. I've been Charlie McGee.
I've been George McGee.
Or has he? Or was it all a dream?
I'm Doug Quaid.
I want my body back. Okay. Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Open your mind. Open your mind.
Well, this is me, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and this is me on the screen here, riding towards the camera. It was a great scene because she's trying so hard for me not to see the news. You can see here with the eye, no matter what I do, the kissing, the hugging with her, I'm more interested in what's going on Mars. Here, this is my job. I'm a construction worker, and I'm totally amazed. I'm looking at the gun.
Yes, so this is really this.
Exactly. How did I do that? Here's the great fight scene with Sharon and me. Ow, that hurt. I continuously used him as a human shield, and then I threw him down the escalator. And now he just got the message that he should actually put a wet towel around his head.
Which is also like crazy.
Exactly, yeah. So that they cannot detect of where time, I run around like an Indian. That's the funniest scene. She's trying to steal the suitcase. Now they have problems following it. This scene is unbelievable because my frustration about this taxi cab does not understand where I want to go. Again, I got away. I realizes that there's a hologram of him. And now he's telling him that he has to take this bug out of his nose, which is this gross scene. Remember, everyone was grossed out. Me putting this thing up my nose. There was the bug that was inside my nose. And that's why they always could find me. Now here they are following, obviously, I put the little device that was in my nose, I put in the chocolate, gave it to the rat, and the rat is now running around with that device. But they don't know, they think that I'm right there, they're on my track.
Thank you.
This is a wonderful scene where I come up to Mars as an old lady.
You think this is the end of the podcast? It is.